Hey, fourth graders, welcome back to math time. Yesterday we talked a little bit about finding equivalent fractions, and we're going to start off math today by just looking at one of those really quick. So that's going to lead into talking about what we're going to look at today. So if I have the fraction 1 over 4, I want to find a fraction that is equivalent to that. So I need to find one specific number to multiply my numerator by, and to multiply that same number by to my denominator to find an equivalent fraction. So if I had 1/4, I picked 5. I multiplied my numerator by 5 and got 5. 1 times 5 is 5. And I multiplied my denominator by 5. 4 times 5, and that got me 20. So that tells me that 5 over 20 is equivalent to 1/4. But what if we start with 5/20ths? We need to go backwards. We need to simplify. What do we do then? Well, let's take a look at that. Well, I did mention the word simplify. And simplify simply does mean to find an equivalent or equal fraction with a smaller numerator and denominator. So we're going to be looking at a couple fractions today, or a couple problems today where we need to simplify our fractions. All right, so if I go back to my original question that I started with today, where we started with 1/4 and we had to find an equivalent fraction, we ended up finding out that 5/20ths was equivalent. I multiplied my numerator and I multiplied my denominator by the same number. So when we were finding an equivalent fraction that had a bigger numerator and bigger denominator, we multiplied. Now, let's pretend that we're starting with 5/20ths and I ask you to simplify it. I ask you to find a fraction that is equal to it, but has a smaller numerator and smaller denominator. We're going to have to go this way. So if we went this way, we multiplied. But since we're going the opposite direction, we're going to do the opposite of multiplication, which is division. So when I look at this problem here, if I start with my fraction of 2/4 and I ask you to simplify 2/4, I need to find a number that I can divide into 2, and I can divide that same number into 4. It just so happens to be that these two numbers are both even numbers, and when we have two numbers that are even numbers, we can always divide by 2. Now it just happens to be that that's the best number to pick in this situation, because if I do 2 divided by 2, I get 1. And if I do 4 divided by 2, I get 2. So 2/4 does equal 1/2. Let's look at another problem. If I have 30 over 36, I need to think of one specific number that I can divide evenly into 30 and also divide evenly into 36. Now if I know my times tables really well, I know that 6 can divide into 30 evenly, and it can divide into 36 evenly, in which case I would happen to get 5/6, because 30 divided by 6 does equal 5, and 36 divided by 6 does equal 6, in which case a simplified fraction of 30 over 36 would be 5/6. I'm sure there's a couple of you saying right now, Mr. Rush, do I have to always pick that big number right away? And no, you don't. Because if you have 30 over 36, there are other smaller numbers that evenly divide into 30 and evenly divide into 36. So you can do this in a couple different steps instead of just one big step. So I also know, you can see it, I also know that 3 can divide into 30 evenly, and 3 can divide evenly into 36. So that would give me a fraction of 10 over 12. Now I know that I can still get to a smaller fraction than just 10 over 12. Okay, so I need to think of another number that can evenly divide into 10 and evenly divide into 12. Now if I think for a second, well, they're both even numbers, so I'm going to divide by 2. Okay, if I divide by 2, 10 divided by 2 does equal 5, and 12 divided by 2 does equal 6. In which case, we still get that same answer of 5/6 as our simplified fraction from 30 over 36. I want to walk you through my thought process of what I think about when I figure out what number I want to divide my numerator by and my denominator by. Okay, so if I have the fraction 20 over 35, I can either start with a really low number or I can start with a higher number like 10. Let me start with a low number first. Okay, I think to myself, well, I know that both of these numbers can be divided by 1, and that would still be 20 over 35. So I would go up to 2. Can 20 be divided by 2? Well, yeah, it can. 20 divided by 2 is 10. But 35 is an odd number, so we know that can't be divided by 2. So I'd go up to my next number. Can they be divided by 3? 6 times 3 is 18, and 7 times 3 is 21, so can't be 3. What about 4? I know that 5 times 4 does equal 20, but 35 divided by 4 is not going to be a whole even number. Okay, so I would go up to my next number, and I would say, can 5 be divided into 20 evenly? And I think I just did say that with my last one, because 4 times 5 does equal 20. And can 5 be divided into 35? Well, sure it can. We know that 7 times 5 does equal 35. In which case, I can say that 20 divided by 5 is 4, and 35 divided by 5 is 7. In which case, 4/7 is my simplified fraction here. So we did just talk about counting up to try to find that one number to divide our fraction by, but we can also count down. I recommend starting at 10. You can start higher, but I just like to start at 10. So if I have the fraction 27 over 45, I can start at 10. I ask myself, does 10 divide evenly into 27, or does 10 divide evenly into 45? I know that 10 doesn't divide evenly into 27 because it doesn't end in a 0. Same with 45. So now I'm going to count down. I'm going to go to my next number, which would be 9. And I would say, does 9 divide evenly into 27? I know that 9 times 3 does equal 27, so it does. But does 9 divide evenly into 45? I know that 9 times 5 does equal 45, in which case 9 would be a great number to divide both of these numbers by. So I'm going to pick 9, and if I divide 27 by 9, like I said, I get 3. And if I divide 45 by 9, then I get 5, in which case 27 over 45 has a simplified fraction of 3 over 5. So that concludes our mini lesson today. I know that there's just a couple questions in the math book, and then another practice sheet that I want you guys to do where you will be simplifying fractions. Hey, let me know if you have any questions, and as always, wash your hands.